we're going to do today is we're going to prepare a Windows 10 machine to be sent to the deployment server, and we're going to customize it a little bit, and then what we can do is we can deploy this exact same image to other clients in our network. The Windows 10 machine and the practical application of this is you may have some staff that use specific software. So they might use, the accounting department might use Excel, they might use some sort of calculator app, the technical support team might use Putty, they might want Firefox or Chrome instead of Microsoft Edge, most likely will want Office. So what you don't want to do is have to walk around the office installing these packages as people request them. And also, if someone's machine becomes corrupt, you don't want the hassle of having to rebuild that machine with all the custom software back in it again as and when it's required. So what we want to try and do is build some kind of a custom machine that will allow us to deploy to different machines in our network. Okay, so how are we going to do that? Well, first of all, let's put some software onto this Windows 10 machine, just as a proof of concept. And the software I thought we could put on would be Putty. So I went to putty.org and I downloaded the installer for Putty 64-bit installer, and I also made a little file called Michael's Test Machine. I'm just going to put that there. So what I'm going to do now is we'll just run through the installation of Putty. It's a small program, and we'll say that we want it to be installed on the local hard drive. Alright, so let that run, and that should put an icon on our desktop, and we'll not bother viewing the README file. Right, so now we have some software installed. Okay, a test machine file, a folder called test, and Putty. Now we could imagine that this is, we could go around the office and, you know, make a spreadsheet, find out what software everyone wants, and build some kind of a custom company image. We could even have, you know, custom desktop backgrounds, a login message when they log in. We can customize all of this. Now let's say we've done that. Probably a valuable next step would be, okay, let's just close down Edge here. A valuable next step would be something along the lines of going in to Windows Explorer, going to the C drive, okay, and running the disk cleanup, running a defrag, emptying the wastebasket, just doing a general cleanup on the system. Now, I'm not going to do that just now because this is just my little test machine, and I'd rather we just got started with preparing the image. So let's just close down this Microsoft Edge launcher, see if we can get rid of it. Close window. Welcome to the new productivity suite. Thank you. Will you go away though? What about if we do close? Won't go away. Interesting. It must be difficult for people who aren't, you know, necessarily quite used to using computers to deal with things like this happening to them, because obviously if they want to get on with their work, it's quite difficult if a browser's forcing them to do a kind of tour of the new experience. So let's just kill Edge there, stop it from taking up our valuable resources. Okay, so we've got our custom software for this test set up, and now what we're going to do is prepare the image. And what I'm going to do, in being very sensible, is I'm going to take a snapshot of the image running. Okay, so I'm going to call this before Sysprep. Now, Sysprep will allow us to prepare the system and create a custom install.wim file that we can send to the deployment server later on. But first of all, we have to get this Windows to make an image of itself. Okay, and the way we do that is we just open up the run, and into run we want to enter Sysprep. And then just click OK. And that will launch Sysprep. And then once Sysprep has launched, it should bring up a folder. You'll see this in a second. We want to run this Sysprep application. What that'll do is that will create a custom image of this machine that we can then send to the deployment server. So what we're going to do here is we're going to say that we want, leave it, when the image is created, what do we want to happen? We want it to enter the out-of-box experience, okay? So when it gets deployed onto our different machines, what we actually want is we actually want the machine to load up and look like it's just brand new and out of the box. This generalized box will generalize the image as well, and we don't want to reboot. What we want to do is we want to shut down. So we want this to prepare an image of itself and then shut itself down, ready for the next step. Okay, so let's run that now. At this point, what I'll do is I'll pause the recording, because what's going to happen is this dialogue is going to run, and then once it's finished, the machine's going to shut itself down. The Sysprep, alright, so the Sysprep's finished preparing the machine, and now it's shutting itself down. So what it's actually done is it's created a standard image, an install.wim file, that includes our application putty that we installed for test, and it's going to shut itself down, and it's ready now for the next step. Okay, so we'll wait for this to shut down before we begin the next stage. So now that the machine has sysprepped and shut itself down as we told it to, we can start up the server. Now the server should have DHCP, DNS, Active Directory domain services, and the Windows deployment services server role running on it. So now that the client machine has the software installed on it to create our standard image, and we've run Sysprep and it's shut itself down, we can now go over to the server, and on the server, if we just go to Tools and launch the WDS Manager, the Microsoft Management Console for Windows Deployment Services, and if we go into Servers, we should have this little green play button to show that WDS is running. Now in the last video, we created two boot images. One of them is just a standard deployment image. So that's for sending client ISOs, client install.wim images out. And what's inside that boot image is just a default Windows pre-execution environment that will allow us to send an image over the network to a client machine. We also created this capture image. I've called it Capture Michael, so that it's obvious, and that's a special version of Windows pre-execution environment that will actually allow us to send an image from a client machine to the server, okay? And that's called capturing an image. So other things that we need to have for this to work, we need to have DHCP running so that the client machine, when it boots into Windows pre-execution environment, it gets an IP address from the DHCP server. We want to have our Active Directory domain services running as well. We want to have DNS running. So those are all up and running and looking happy in Server Manager. So let's now go to the client and boot it into the capture image. So I'm going to go over to the client now. It's important that we don't start the client. Okay, what we want to do, and this is a little like a little fun thing with VMware. When I start it, I'm going to have to start it, and then I'm going to have to click and press F12 repeatedly to get it to network boot itself. So let's start the guest operating system, and then watch. I'm going to go click F12, click F12, click F12, click F12, click F12. There we go. So now the client machine has network booted, and that's going to allow us to choose one of these versions of Windows pre-execution environment. And of course we want to choose the capture image. So let's choose the capture image, and what's going to happen now is the client machine is going to pull the capture image, the special boot.wim file, down and run the Windows pre-execution environment capture image wizard. So now that our Windows 10 client machine has booted into the capture image, we should see and should be presented with this Windows Deployment Services image capture wizard. So this is a special version of Windows pre-execution environment that allows us to work and to capture images. So let's go next, and it's going to ask which volume to capture. Doesn't really matter, we can choose what we like in there. Okay, and the image name and image description, obviously we should put something sensible here. Don't call it Windows 10 Pro x64, because then you're going to end up with 5 images all called Windows 10. So we're going to call this one Windows 10 with putty. Windows 10 with putty. Now obviously in the real world we would install a lot more software than this, but this is good just for a test. So let's click next. Now the name and location, this is where it wants to save the file in case there's a problem, the image is corrupted or there's a network malfunction. So we're going to browse here. Now notice that I have 40 gig free on this D disk and only 500 meg free there. Now we know these install.wim files can be upwards of, I've seen them being 40 gig. This one I think is about 2 or 3 gig. So we don't want to save it on the C drive because we only have 500 meg space there. So let's go into local disk D, and just here at the root of the drive, let's just create a file called Windows _with _putty and hit save. Alright, and it'll automatically put the .wim extension on it because it's an install.wim file that we're creating here. So next what we want to do is we want to tick the box to upload the image to the deployment server, and then it's going to ask us for the server name. So in here we're going to put the IP address of the server, 10.10.10.1, and hit connect. Now obviously we have to have DHCP working on the network so that we can talk to the server. Right, it's going to bring up this credential UI broker, this is called. So the username, we want to give the fully qualified domain username. So it's going to be ec.sa.com/administrator. And then we press down arrow, and we have to type the password in the order of the password. So let's go capital E $. Okay, and if we press down, we can press space here to remember my credentials, and then just at OK we just click return. Okay, and if that goes away, that means it's connected. Alright, if it doesn't, there might be an issue with the password. I've sometimes forgot the last character because it doesn't let you see the password as you type it. So the last little thing is the image group name, and that's set up on the deployment server. Image group 1's absolutely fine for that. And then we just click next, and the Windows Deployment Services image capture wizard will now begin the process of sending that image to the deployment server. The Windows Deployment Services image capture wizard has finished the first stage of the process. That's setting up the image. The next stage, which is a little bit quicker, will be sending the image to the deployment server. So here we go, 17%. So this would be running across the network. if we had a network in place. Look at that. Okay, so we have this little dialog here that says it's uploading the image to the Windows deployment services server. 99% complete. The install image was created successfully. So now we can just click on finish. Okay, and we can just shut this client down. Let's just wait until, okay, it's rebooting now, so let's just power off the client machine. Shut down. Okay, so the client we've created our reference image, we've booted into the capture Windows pre-execution environment, we've sent the image to the deployment server. So now if we head over to Windows Server 2022 and we go into our, let's close one of these, there's no point in having two open. We go into our Windows Deployment Services Manager. Now if we go to the Install Images folder, okay, and into Image Group 1, we should see right here that we have Windows 10 with PuTTY. Okay, so Windows 10 with PuTTY is now available as an install.wim image on our deployment server. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to show you how we can put that onto one of the clients in our network. So let's say a member of staff comes up and they say, I've come in this morning and my machine says it's blue screened, or it's corrupt, or it says no bootable medium found. So we'll go down and we'll be like, right, okay, let's just re-image the machine. So let me create a new blank kind of test machine to do this on. The other one, we'll just leave the other one just now. I'm going to do a fresh, blank, empty shell of a machine. So we're going to choose I will install the operating system later, because we're going to install it using Windows Deployment Services. And then we'll just leave it on Windows 10. The location doesn't matter, but let's call it WDS PuTTY image test, so that we know which one we're deleting. You want to try and avoid having multiple machines called Windows 10 x64. Windows 10 x64 1, 2, 3. Okay, so at least give it some descriptive name and choose BIOS, and then just leave everything else as default. Now, just for the purposes of demonstration of speeding this up, this would be fine on 2 gig of RAM, but I'm going to put it up to 4, just so that the process isn't so slow. Okay, now for the moment we'll leave this on that, but I'm going to edit that at the end. Just leave everything else as default. Create a virtual disk, and we'll save it as a single file just to make it easier for us to delete later. Leave that as default, and let's customize hardware, and let's place the network adapter in the same network as the deployment server so that they can talk to each other, so that this machine can get an IP address and things like that. Okay, so I'm happy with this blank empty client. This is an empty shell of a machine. I'm going to click finish, and then let's start this up. So let's start it up, and we're going to network boot it. So again, I'm going to start it, and I'm going to press F12. So you have to be quite quick with this. You need to click into the machine and press F12. So let's go start. There we go. When you see this DHCP, that means it's talking to the server. Okay, brilliant. Now, we have two choices here. We can either go into a capture wizard, but why would we want to do that? This is an empty machine. So we want to use the standard Windows 10 pre-execution environment. So let's boot into that. And then the deployment server will send Windows pre-execution environment over onto the network, and that'll start up on this empty machine. And Windows pre-execution environment will then allow us to choose an install image. So now that Windows pre-execution environment has loaded onto our new blank machine, we're just going to set the keyboard input language to United Kingdom. Now this is just in case we have any special characters in the password. Okay, if we have any special characters in the password, the keyboard, the classic example is the @ symbol is in a different place on the UK keyboard. So you always want to do that just in case there's a character in the password. Right, so the next thing it's going to ask is give me some credentials to log in to this WDS server. So we're going to put ec.sa.com/administrator and put the password in. And just click OK, and hopefully it'll accept this. There we go. Now we can see that we have some different options available to us. So we're going to use this one here, Windows 10 with PuTTY. So I'm just going to click Next on that. And what that's going to do is we'll just partition the disk. Now, if there are other partitions here, we can just select Drive Options and delete them. Let's just go for the whole disk. And now what's going to happen is this client is going to pull that install.wim image that we just captured from the other machine onto this machine here. Okay, so the client machine has loaded up and we now have the out-of-box experience. So I'm just going to answer some of these questions to get us into the machine. So skip adding keyboard layouts, connect to a network. Now for the moment we'll just say that we don't have internet because we're on the domain, we're on our internal domain. So let's just say we don't have internet and continue with a limited setup. So we're not going to be able to do all this online stuff that they want us to sign into. Accept the digital handcuffs. Okay, so just going to sign into this PC as a default user. And we'll just make the password the usual password we use for the subject. Now, what I normally do for this part is just put Edinburgh for the answer for them all. Just something that if I ever, we're unlikely to ever have to use these, but it makes you do 3. So there we go. And then it's going to ask us about setting up. So more with device history, no. Digital assistant, no. Don't use speech recognition. No location. No find my device. Basic diagnostic data. No typing. No tailored experiences. No advertising ID. And here we are into the first time setup. So getting everything ready for me. And then I think the next one's just a few moments. Oh, it might take several minutes. I think the next one's just a moment. So now that the installation process is finished, we have our client machine and it's installed, and we have the PuTTY application that we set up in the standard image on the reference computer, the reference machine here on the desktop. We also noticed that the test file and test folder are gone. And that's because when we do generalize and sysprep the image, it will carry over our applications, but it won't carry over things like files on the desktop and things like that. So now, when we went through that installation, okay, we still did have to answer a lot of questions. About where we wanted to partition the disk, what we wanted, did we want to enable speech recognition, and there is a way that we can actually automate that process as well. So if we go over to the server and we actually go into the properties of the Windows Deployment Services server, under the Client tab, we can actually tick this box to enable an unattended installation, and we can actually create a special file called an answer file, and that answer file would automatically answer those questions for us during the installation, and that would further streamline this deployment services process. So there it is, Sysprep, custom image, and deploy to a test machine.